Today on the History of Action Figures, Episode 5, we are going to focus on probably the most popular Marvel superhero, and that is So what is going on, my fellow collectors? How is everybody doing today? Daredevil19 here, and today we are up to episode 5 of the History of Action Figures, and in this episode we are featuring everyone's favorite web slinger, and that is Peter Parker's Spider-Man. In this episode, I'm mainly just going to cover Peter Parker's Spider-Man figures. I tried my best with all my research finding out all the different figure lines that have made Spider-Man figures, and there are quite a few. But if I did miss any, I do apologize. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. So strap in, get a drink with some popcorn or nachos, and let's take a ride on this video, because it might be a long one. So starting it off with Migo, this was the very first toy company to give us Spider-Man action figures. This was more of an 8-inch scale figure line and had around 14 points of articulation. Migo did introduce the first true Spider-Man action figures in the 1970s. I believe they started their figure line around 1972 and went on until about 1980. These toys were actually very similar to how the original 12-inch G.I. Joe action figures were, which were more doll-like with interchangeable outfits and such. One of the rarest pieces from Migo was their 12-inch Spider-Man figure that was included with a spiderweb. This was a bit larger in scale compared to their typical 8-inch figures, which was one of the best Spider-Man action figures at the time. It came in a few different styles of packaging, including a blister card style and enclosed boxes. It seems like Migo made around 10 different Spider-Man figures, or possibly a few more. The figures were very similar to one another with slight differences that is kind of hard to notice, mainly like the differences were the spider symbols on the chest. Migo did experiment with a variety of different scales during this era, but once Star Wars came around with their 3 3/4-inch figures, Migo decided to give this scale a try, but did not succeed. The company did fade out in the early 80s and made Marvel figures for around 8 years, but surprisingly, they came back recently in 2018, relaunching their brand of toys, which you can find in stores like Target and Walmart today. But today they make stuff like Rick and Morty, The Last Airbender, DC, and other things. Amazing that they were able to relaunch their figure line almost over 40 years later. Also, I was mispronouncing their name. It's Migo, not Migo. Now let's head over to our next figure company. Before Toy Biz or Hasbro, there was Mattel, which is a company that is still around making action figures today. Mattel created their first big action figure line for Marvel in 1984 with the Secret Wars line. One of the most popular figures, by no surprise, was Spider-Man. The scale of these figures were in the 4.5-inch range. Not only did they make figures in this line, but they also made vehicles and playsets. These figures came in a blister card style package, and on the back you had a character illustration and a little biography, along with other figures that were available in that wave or series. Mattel's Secret War line seemed to only last about a year from 1984 till 85, so they didn't make too many figures, and as you see, not many Spider-Man figures. Continuing into the 90s and transitioning into the 2000s, we had a great figure company that got a hold of the Marvel license around 1993, and this company is what really reeled me back into collecting action figures, and that is Toy Biz. Toy Biz did have multiple licenses along with Marvel, and during the 90s they made your basic type of action figures with limited points of articulation, but in the early 2000s is where Toy Biz really started making awesome action figures. They gave us their classic blister card style packaging, and specific lines also included illustrated comic books with their figures along with Build-A-Figures. And Toy Biz has a long list, and I mean long, of all the Spider-Man figures they have made. They made Spider-Man figures from the comics, TV series, and movies, so they were pumping out Spider-Man figures left and right from heroes and villains, and this is where we first started getting fully posable action figures. Yeah, they still did action features here and there, which I despised, but they made some amazing posable action figures for its time. They also had a huge 18-inch movie Spider-Man figure that was insane from the original trilogy, and I know Shartimus Prime has reviewed it on his YouTube channel, which I'll probably have it pop up on the top right. But Toy Biz mainly focused on a more 5-inch, 6-inch scale figure line from the time they were in business. And I'm sure most of you know this, but they did start making the Marvel Legends line, which Hasbro took over and are incredibly successful with today. But sadly, all good things do come to an end, and Toy Biz did end up going out of business around the year 2007. And from what I recall, it seemed like they were giving too much with their product and charging too little to keep the company afloat. So they ended up having to sell and close down, which, as we all know, Hasbro took over. So now let's continue into the next big toy company that took over the Marvel license, which most of you will be familiar with because I literally just mentioned them. Around the year 2006, Marvel made a new deal to have their action figures produced by Hasbro, which continues to this day, and their highly successful Marvel Legends line. Marvel Legends made the transition to the new company in 2007, keeping the name and the Build-A-Figure concept. Over the years, Hasbro has designed waves around comics, video games, and film properties, mainly from the MCU. Before Marvel Legends really took over at Hasbro, a few years prior they were making smaller scale Marvel figures, which were the 3 3/4 inch scale, and man, I hated this time because I cannot stand that scale.
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
It didn't last long and collectors kept requesting that Hasbro bring back Marvel Legends, which they did, and at first collectors weren't too happy at all with what they were giving us. But after a few waves, Hasbro went back to their workstation to really fix up the Marvel Legends line and give us what we have today. Hasbro still does make the 3 3/4 inch scale figures, but they mainly focus much more on their 6-inch scale. They also do make 12-inch figures as well, but not too many of them. And I can't even tell you how many Spider-Man figures they have made from 3 3/4 inch, 6-inch, and 12-inch, and not just counting Peter Parker Spider-Man figures. They have made so many, and I would not be surprised if it was over 100 by now. But Hasbro has been doing a very good job since they picked up the Marvel license, and you can still find new waves of Marvel Legends in stores today. But their Spider-Man figures are some of their most popular. They just have specific Marvel Legends waves that are dedicated to Spider-Man characters. Now, let's move on to a slightly bigger figure scale line. Diamond Select Toys have been producing a bunch of pretty good figures ranging from the 2-inch Minimates to the highly detailed Marvel Select line, and often focuses on specific looks from classic designs of characters to more recent looks, along with some movie versions. From Captain America, Wolverine, Iron Man, Black Widow, the Hulk, and of course, Spider-Man. Their line is slightly bigger in scale to the basic 6-inch figure scale. They focus more on 1/10 scale, which is around 7 to 8 inches. Their figures come more in a larger bubble card style package, and that is more suited for displaying your figures mint in box. Diamond Select gives you more when it comes to paint and sculpt. Yeah, their articulation isn't the best, but I mean, it's decent, and they give you a pretty good amount of accessories as well. They have made a lot of different Spider-Man figures over the years, and as I mentioned before, from comic versions to classic suit versions and current suit versions to movie versions, and they're still going pretty strong today with releases. Alrighty, next here I decided to throw in Hot Toys, even though I try to strictly stick to scales under 1/6 scale, but figured I'd throw them in this video. So Hot Toys has been around for a while, and in 2010 is when they really started gaining popularity, and today they are one of the most well-known, popular, high-end figure lines when it comes to 12-inch scale figures. And collectors absolutely love the amount of detail that go into making these figures. Personally, I'm not a fan of this scale, but they do make some amazing pieces. From what I gathered, the very first Spider-Man Hot Toys made was the original movie Spider-Man, with Tobey Maguire wearing the classic suit that they did in 2011. Then they also made the symbiote Spider-Man suit from Spider-Man 3 in 2012, along with the Amazing Spider-Man Andrew Garfield suit from the first film. Then they also made the Amazing Spider-Man 2 suit in 2014. And since then, they made a ton more Spider-Man figures. Hot Toys have been making Spider-Man figures for well over a decade, from comic versions, video game versions, and of course, movie versions, and they're still going very strong today, releasing new Spider-Man figures. Now, this video is going to be pretty long, so I'm breaking it down in 2 parts, and part 1 is going to end here, so be on the lookout for part 2. Once it's uploaded, it will pop up at the end of the video here. Thanks for watching, and don't forget, I will catch you on the next episode of Daredevil 19, and I will also see you guys later!
We shall start with revenge. I am the knight. Gonna change the future.